Hello everybody, this is Carter Sandvin. This is just a note before the video, just to clear up if anything looked messy to you guys in terms of editing. I recorded this video, and the way that it works on my camcorder is the video overlaps itself by like 30 minutes. So if I record a 2-hour video on my camcorder, right? Every 30 minutes it'll actually start a new video. So I'll actually have 4 different saved videos for that one video, and I was trying to transfer all of the videos over onto my computer, and the very first one was corrupted. Something was wrong with it, so I just re-recorded what I was covering in that first section. So I'm hoping that they can somewhat sync up well, but if things look messy or if things look kind of confusing in terms of the flow of the video, I hope that that can explain it for you guys. Hopefully it's not that big of a deal, but let's hope that we cleared up any confusion. Anyways, let's get on with the video. So today in this video, I'm going to be showing you the reason that I have a sketchbook filled with nothing but drawings of my cat. Let's get started. Welcome back everybody, I am Carter Sandvin and this is the channel for Sandbox Illustration. Today I'm going to be discussing with you my art journey of sorts and what has led me to the point that my art is at today. So in my previous video I've discussed with you my history with art, what started me in art, and what my current goals are with art, but I never really got into my art making process yet, or what even led me up to that, and it's actually quite a big story. So this sketch that we have right here is a piece that I started a few months back. It is a fan art of me and my cousins sort of doing the thing of making us sort of badass characters, if you will. And I was making this piece, and then it kind of hit me that something about this piece, while I was making it, it just wasn't really doing what I needed the piece to do, if that makes any sense. I got this far in making it, and then I just thought to myself, I don't think I like this. So I was going through my head trying to think of what it was, and if I had to say what I thought about it personally, the characters in this piece look really lifeless in terms of their expressions, their poses, their just overall the layout of these characters. They don't seem human. They seem too much just like figures that I've kind of put together to make this piece instead of a drawing of an actual group of people trying to do something. And there's a few things that I think come into play with that. One of them is a couple of the facial features, or actually just one. It's really just the eyes. So if you look at this piece here, this character right here, if you note right there, the way that I drew the eyes in this is just a solid circle, and then I have the eyelids within that circle. The problem with that is the eyes look fake. The eyes don't look like an organic piece of the overall face. It looks like they were put on there. And also, a lot of the eyes that are in this don't have much in terms of dynamics, in terms of expression. And then another part of it too is kind of the anatomy of the characters. In terms of proportions, they're alright, but there's just a couple of things. Like if we look at the poses here, a lot of them first off are quite bland poses, but other ones are the way that, in fact, actually, if we look back at this character again, like this arm here, if you note, there's no foreshortening with the body, so none of the poses with these characters look dynamic. The only one that does is probably this guy in the back who's got his arms up in the air. These poses really just look flat, you know, because there's no foreshortening, there's no depth. You don't get any depth with it, at least. And even just some of the anatomy doesn't work. Like if you look at the hand here, you can see that the fingers actually look quite odd. They don't look like they work as fingers should. And a lot of this you could say is quite nitpicky, and I can understand that. Some people are probably going to look at this and be like,
oh my god, Carter, that piece is amazing. What are you talking about? I can only draw stick people.
I know. To everybody out there, I know you can only draw stick people, and it's okay. But that doesn't mean that my art cannot improve, because it can. Just all of that together really does just look very flat and lifeless. Like, these don't look like people. They just look like shapes, you know? They just look like pieces that I put together. And I was starting to think to myself, like, there's something wrong with this piece, but like, there's something really wrong with it, like to the point where I don't think it's just the piece. So I was trying to figure out, do I need to change my style? And in fact, once I actually noticed the thing about the eyes, I was immediately like, I should probably change my style. That might be best. So, after I got about halfway through this piece, I started what I actually called my Style Overhaul. This folder right here is full of a bunch of different pages that cover different aspects of me trying to tune up my art, in a sense. The way that this went down was I tried to go back to some of the basics. One thing that I do have to note though, I do have this page, which is actually an expressions sheet that I made. Doesn't matter what I'm going to say later in the video, this is absolutely perfect. I have never been more proud of doing a sheet like this, you know, like different sheets where you have different options of like poses or figures, expressions. This, I think, is an amazing expression sheet because it shows what each part of the face does in different aspects, and you could apply this to any character and it'll work. I am going to be going through and showing my problem with this older Style Overhaul that I did, but this right here, I would not change a thing about it. So then the next one that we have, I actually did a hand study. I didn't really go into like studying the hand, I more just looked at poses. I thought that I had a good idea of like the shape of a hand, so I more just went into like different poses. Oh, and you see that it's got that classy middle finger there for you. That's all that one really was. Not really anything in terms of education or learning from it. Then the next one that we have is actually covering the body itself. So like what I thought I would use like in terms of making proportions and stuff. I touched on a couple things like proportions of the body, differences of the pelvis. On the other side is actually body types. Like you got sort of that lankier guy, you got a fat guy, buff guy, curvy woman, child, stuff like that. This one here, again, not really much in terms of like trying to learn something new. I was just refreshing, I guess, on different things right here. So like we've got the noses here, different noses that I could try. And again, there's nothing wrong with this. Like all of these are totally valid. And in fact, the way that I even draw now after everything, like I still use these. Then we got different eyes. This one was kind of interesting. I was actually trying to test, if you can see that, I was trying to figure out my best way of drawing Asian eyes, actually. I wanted to diversify my characters, bring in different races, different looks, different features. So I tried to like figure out the way that I draw Asian characters, because if you look up here, I draw my eyes, like I do just like a solid circle, and then I put where the eyelids are going to be, and then I cut off the rest of the eye, but still the base is a solid circle, and it's they're always going to look like that. So I was trying to figure out how I could do that for Asian eyes. Is it racist for me to do that? I have no idea. I don't know what's racist anymore, so I'm just gonna say it's not, because I'm attempting to diversify my characters. So that, hey, that's pro-Asian. I believe that's all the stuff for my education, but the problem with it is I was trying to do a Style Overhaul, and they're like, all I really did was just kind of recap on what I already did, so I didn't change too much. I did change one thing though, the thing that I noted the most. I did actually change the eyes, looking at this piece and this one here. So this one actually goes first. This was my style study, where I was trying to experiment with different styles. This was my original style that I drew in. This is what all my pieces before looked like. Then I tried kind of an edgier one right there. Then this one's a bit softer, a bit more whimsical, kind of like a Disney style, if you will. But then I actually settled on this one down here, and it's pretty similar to that one, except one thing, I tried to put in more dynamic shapes, like larger curves in the jawline. The hair has much more life and texture to it. But if you note the eyes, for one, I got rid of pupils. So like the eye is just the solid iris, and I got rid of the solid circle, because before, like, it looks almost like a doll, you know, when it's just like that, because it looks like just a piece that you glued onto the face, but now it actually looks like the face. And then you can highlight the eye socket with highlights and shadows, which adds a lot of depth to the face. So that fixed a lot of the problems. And then I took it a step further, just to like fully apply it, as we can see in this one, and I actually made this sketch of me and my girlfriend. And this one, they look really good. You know, there's nothing wrong with these. So I took this style that I had and I tried to expand it. I had a little challenge that I did here, sort of a practice. This is actually my facial application. So I started with this, where I drew me, and then my girlfriend, and my friend Adam, my brother Spencer, and my dad, and my friend John right there. And then I did this one here. This one was like, I tried to find unique people so that I could get like many different features and proportions to really like practice. So I did Rick Grimes right here. This one I think looks awesome. Ryan Reynolds. Larry and Maurice are old co-workers of mine. I did Scarlett Johansson. Nice cleavage I drew. Good job, me. And then you got Davey504 right there, the famous space YouTuber. But that actually was kind of all my style overhaul. So I did that, and then I felt like, hey, you know what? I'm good. I fixed my art. And later on, I actually created a piece that I was quite proud of. So I went and I did the ink of the drawing by hand, and then I went into Photoshop and then I colored it. I really wanted to get that like solid, clean look. And also, this is what I plan on doing, hopefully, for my comics, is hand drawing them and then coloring them in on the computer. But I looked at that and I was like, that looks pretty dang good. You know, it fixed the issues that the other one had, but there was still just something about it. And you could argue that I was just being too harsh of a self-critic, but I looked at that piece and I was like, it looks good, but I still feel like I can do something about it. I feel like there's still something that needs fixing, but I don't know what. So I was just kind of looking at my own artwork, unhappy. So I just decided I'm just gonna reach for some outside help. And so I actually went online and I looked up what some online artists had as advice for having trouble with style. And then I found this one video actually, but that guy, he actually, what he did was he had a video talking about bad art style advice. He mentioned in that, essentially, which was kind of a shock to me, that like you need to stop focusing on style. And from what I understood about style was like, how can you not focus on style? That's literally like just how you draw your pictures. But then he made a great point, and he started to discuss, you know, the purpose of style and why artists use style. And actually what he said was, style is used for problem solving. So like a good example that he actually used was Walt Disney, when he drew Mickey Mouse, he did like the hand, the clear, solid white glove that barely had any features on it, and it was just the 3 fingers. He drew it that way because it was easier to animate. But Walt Disney still understood the anatomy of the hand and how the hand worked. And so that's what he meant by problem solving. And so that started to get my gears turning a little bit. So what the guy actually said later on in the video is, stop getting so hung up on style and focus more on the fundamentals and actually perfecting your craft at making art. And I just had that epiphany. I never learned how to make art. I just made art. Like, the way that I think of it is, me personally, I've always defined mastery as a combination of 2 things, and that is skill and knowledge. But when it came to art, I was only skill, because I never went and studied the fundamentals. I never studied art, and whenever I did, I hated studying it. I was just like, I just want to draw it. But I never took the time to master my knowledge of it. So I was like, you know what? The things that I was having trouble with, I will be able to figure out later on when I actually master the skills and the fundamentals. And so I was starting to look up what the fundamentals were, and it was covering stuff like, you know, perspective and anatomy and composition, and mastering those things, and or at least getting a good idea of them. And I was like, I absolutely have to do that. That's genius. And so when I was talking about my style overhaul and mentioning, I wasn't really educating myself on it, but I was more so just like reminding myself of how I did it, sort of just refreshing, not really learning anything new. That is the whole point of actually this book right here, which I kind of called my art journey, which I used to study absolutely everything that I can in terms of the art fundamentals and just basic rudimentary stuff in terms of improving my art. So doing this, I actually think I fixed my art. And so I wanted to show this book to you guys today, because this book is so important to me. This book is very, very valuable to me, and I hope that it can be of some value to you guys as well. So let's just crack it open. So, my art journey with my cute little insignia down there. But we got the index, so this just is everything that we have in it. We have the introduction, which is actually this part. We have, and then it's studying and research, then notes on fundamentals plus extra tips, practicing the fundamentals, then anatomy. I had to make anatomy its own section because since I create characters, that's my main focus, I had to make sure that I got the human body down to a science, you know what I mean? And then after that, I have experiment with styles, and then create a drawing, draw different faces, draw animals and creatures, draw environments, and the conclusion of the book. I'm just going to read this out for you, this first little opener that I have. I believe that is the introduction. Yeah, that's the introduction. This journal that I'm writing in is a very big deal. I'm starting down the path to truly find my style. I want to make sure I master my craft before I jump into any serious project. I've been drawing for a very long time. It's always been a lifelong passion. But if this is going to carry me through the rest of my life, then I need to make sure that I have my artistic ability at its 100%. That requires studying, trial and error, and lots of practice. And this journal is going to keep track of all of that. Let's have fun drawing. Part 1, studying and research. The basic gist that I had of this was don't start taking any notes, just sort of sit back and absorb all of the information that I can, all of the tips, tricks, knowledge that I can about making art, specifically from artists that I very much look up to, people that I follow on Instagram, subscribe to on YouTube, creators of stories that I've read. And in fact, that's actually what I say in the beginning. It's just, the biggest thing was like, I just wanted to make sure that they had my full attention when I was actually trying to learn from them. Then I would basically just go back and recap and then take notes from there. So I've got pretty much everybody that I'm not subscribed to, but I follow on Instagram that's a big artist. Mainly people that give out a lot of tips, either give out a lot of tips or show like their like step-by-step process, just so I could get an idea of how they make their art. Read all drawing books, read all comics. YouTube playlists, like I said, I made that art help one, which is gonna be in the description for you guys. And I believe that's all for part 1 with just the studying and research. Like I said, there's not really any notes to take on that. That's more part 2. Notes and tips. Here I am just discussing the fundamentals. What I found to be the 5 most important were perspective, value and lighting, anatomy, composition, and form. Those 5. And then I did put a note here saying that there are subsections to the fundamentals, so if there's any that you guys think I missed that are super important, I probably have discussed them, I hope. This one here is very interesting. It's called the fixation principle, which there actually is a video in the art help playlist that discusses this. There's an artist, gosh, I can't remember his name. Let's Google that real quick. Proko is his name, Proko. That's the guy that created the fixation principle. And then also the guy that talked about the art style advice. His name is Brooks Eggleston. Eggleston. The name's up right there. Again, he's in the playlist. Just go look at the playlist. I won't be going too in depth with it because his video really does go in depth well with it. But manipulation and then observation, education, basically just like discussing like different ways to apply practicing your form to create basically anything that you need to, from a car to a dragon, things like that. And then right here, tip number 1, that is actually me sort of putting in my own words the discussion that Brooks Eggleston had. And I'll just read it for you guys, why not? The goal with the art fundamentals is to recreate real life things on a 2D plane. But then why not just make all photorealistic art? Well, style can be described as problem solving. If a realistic hand is too complicated for your animation, or a realistic backdrop doesn't show the style of your story, then you simplify and manipulate those real life images to solve your problems. That is style. That's how I took it. That was my own interpretation of what he had in his video. Then this one right here, the Shatner Method. This is one of the biggest things that I did with my art for the past few months. What it discusses is a piece of advice that was given to an art YouTuber named Struthless, which I believe he's in the playlist as well, but if not, I will put him in there. But Struthless got some advice from an artist named Mark Shatner. I didn't necessarily have this problem that Struthless did, but I still thought it would be good to hear out at least. Basically, he was starting to feel lost with his artistic endeavors. He wasn't feeling like his art was going anywhere. And so he turned to Mark, and he was like, hey, I need help. I don't know what to do. Like my art isn't going anywhere, blah, blah, blah. But then Mark made the point of, this was Struthless specifically, but he was saying, you have your foot in 10 different artistic doors. The reason that your art isn't going anywhere is because you're trying to do 10 different things at a time and trying to apply yourself equally to 10 different things. Now Mark asked Struthless which one was he most passionate about. And he said, well, his drawing. And so he said, okay, then what you need to do is you need to draw the same thing every single day for an entire year. Struthless did that. He drew nothing. I think it was a magpie, those birds. And there were some days that he would draw, like, he would make 9 drawings of magpies in one day. And so I was thinking, you know what? That would not be a bad exercise for me. Because Struthless actually covered 4 of the biggest reasons why he believed that it was a good exercise to try. Number 1, quantity leads to quality. A lot of people say have quality, not quantity, but if you just keep trying over and over again and don't limit the amount of times, then you can't help but have your art expand into something much more clean and professional and advanced. You just have to keep doing it over and over again. Number 2, constraints force creativity. If you're stuck drawing the same thing, you can apply whatever you want to those drawings, but you have to draw the same thing every single day. You're gonna find ways to draw that thing that you would have never even thought of drawing before. Number 3, action comes before motivation, not the other way around. And Struthless actually made this point beautifully, which was something that I've dealt with, which I think was a big problem with my burnout. I always thought that like you needed that spark, that motivation of just like that creative flow throughout your body to where you could then make art. But if you didn't have it, don't draw, because then you're gonna push the boundaries, then you're gonna hurt yourself and blah, blah, blah. But if you just like buckle down and power through those problems that you're having, not at a dangerous level, like don't hurt yourself mentally, don't cause problems with your process. This is supposed to improve it. If you want to find the motivation to keep doing stuff, you just gotta start. Even if you don't really feel like it, you just have to do it. Just go in and start making art and keep making art. And then at some point you'll find that little thing that causes your spark. And you're like, wow, I can make this. And then number 4, it eliminates thinking as a form of procrastination. If you're just sitting there constantly looking at the blank piece of paper, that blank white sheet that every artist has said gives them an existential fear, which it has to me too. Instead of just sitting there staring at that, trying to think of the best drawing that you can make, if you're just drawing the same thing, you already know what you're going to draw. And that piece of paper doesn't scare you anymore. Those 4 things I thought were beautiful. And I was like, I know that I'm trying to work on stuff, but I can wait. I can take my time. I'm going to do the Shatner Method. Now, I'm sorry, but I wasn't going to waste a whole year of doing this. So, what I set out for myself instead was I would fill out just one sketchbook. I have this little Canson mixed media 5x8 sketchbook, which by the way, if anybody wants to know like what my preferences are for materials, this is by far my favorite brand of sketchbook. The paper is smooth, but it's thick. I've never had a problem with stuff bleeding too much. I've been able to set my ink in there really clearly. It's barely smudged. By that I mean my ink pens. It's not the most like high-end, like there are definitely fancier ones and more expensive ones. But if you want one that's budget friendly and really high quality, this is my preferred one to go with. But anyways, this sketchbook right here is filled with, drum roll, front to back drawings of my cat Gunther. So I did the Shatner Method. Like I said, I wasn't going to do it for a full year. I was just going to try and draw every day until I filled out the sketchbook. So it was going to cover, and so there's like 60 pages, so roughly 2 months, 2 to 3 months, somewhere in there. But I just decided, yeah, I'll draw my cat. Why not? I can apply that in many different ways. And I've even thought of ideas in the past that I never really applied, because I did have that thing of like, oh, that's not a good enough drawing. Like no one's going to want to see that. I'm just not going to make it. But this was a perfect excuse to. So I just want to like go through the journal and just look at not every drawing, but the highlights of this sketchbook. This was the first one. I just wanted to start, just get him out on a piece of paper, get started. It's not that big of a deal, you know. This one doesn't need to be special. It was just to kind of put the first foot forward, if you know what I mean. This one, ooh, this one I want to touch on. What I was trying to go for, so you have that, and then you have this. The way that I thought of it, at least like what I thought the meaning was behind it personally, was like art is just art. Jazza has put it best in one of his videos. Art is not about being the best, it's about trying your best. And it doesn't matter what you think of your art. It doesn't matter if you hate it or if you love it or if other people hate it or if other people love it. If you enjoy creating your art and you are putting in the effort, your art is valid, and it shows that like every artist, no matter what their art looks like, they all have that creativity in their heads to actually apply it to a piece of paper. And so what I saw it as was like, you have this sort of like simplistic stick drawing of Gunther, but then this was sort of what the artist was going for. And that's not really like, that could be misconstrued as like, oh, your art's never gonna be as good as it could be. It's not that cynical. It's in fact, it's the opposite. It's like, hey, no one can take your creativity away from you. As long as you have the idea in your head, it's yours, and it's always going to be yours. Don't let anybody take that away. And also, like, skill is just a thing that slowly comes over time, you know? If your art doesn't look exactly like what you're trying to create, that's okay. Just keep working at it at a steady pace. This is probably one of my favorite drawings in here, just for that reason alone. Freaking zombie Gunther, only like 2 weeks before Halloween. Dude, this was one of the ones that, again, like the colored ones in this sketchbook always popped out the most to me. Yeah, I just love the detail on this one. I love the fine features. Fun fact for you guys, so if you look through all these drawings and you notice that there's a whole thing with like a crinkle in his right ear, the thing with that is back when he was pretty young, like only like 6 years old as a cat maybe, he got ear mites in his ear really bad, to the point where his entire ear got swollen with just like a disgusting pocket of fluid. Yeah, so he had to go and he actually had to get that drained, and because of that his ear now is completely like shriveled. But I love always drawing that, like that's always been like one of Gunther's like main features, was his little funky ear, and I love drawing it. I love having little staples on figures like that, like especially as someone trying to create characters for many stories. You always want to find that one thing that you can attach with a character, you know? Like Nathan Drake, you've got his iconic shoulder holsters, or it could be the ring on the necklace, you know? You've got Kratos and it's that tattoo of his, things like that. I've always tried to find that with figures that I draw, that like one thing that I can attach to that character that is completely unique to that one figure. And I love doing that with my cat. That's always one that I found to be a great one to go to. And it's simple, you know, easily replicable throughout multiple drawings, you know, which is perfect for this sketchbook. This one, there were a few of those days where I was just kind of I just kind of had that feeling of like, I gotta make my Gunther drawing. It doesn't have to be anything special. And I literally just scribbled onto the piece of paper. I look like a psychiatric patient. That's all that I did. I just wanted to scribble onto the page. And then the same thing with this next one. I didn't want it to be anything special, you know? Your drawings don't have to be something that you show off to everybody all the time. That was something that when I learned that, it was one of those things that like it seemed obvious, but also that just like really helped me out as an artist, you know? Everything that you make doesn't have to be something that you show off every single time. Like it can just be something, you know? People don't need to be impressed with your drawings, or at least every single one of your drawings. This next one, dude, I made a Gunther Inkblot. Like if you like divide it right there, you got Gunther. And so I tried to like do like the half and half for an Inkblot. I think it turned out very cool. This one is probably my favorite out of the entire sketchbook. X-Ray of Gunther. And this one was actually really special to me too, because one of the big things that I've learned when it comes to anatomy is like you should master like the realistic thing, so then you can then simplify it in your own way later on for your style. So I've tried to do a lot of stuff with like drawing realistic skeletons of things so that I could then take those, bring them down into simple shapes, and then make a style from there. And so this one was a nice little case study for me on the anatomy of a cat, which I thought was very cool. This one, dude. It's not really any, like, here's the thing. I am not one for abstract art. I can respect it, but like I can't do it, and I don't even want to try to do it. Maybe in the future at some point with just like a challenge, but it's not anything that I'm interested in. But this one, I tried to just like break down Gunther's shape into just like the general features of like the construction of the sketch, and then from there I made them into different things. So like everything on here that makes up Gunther is its own little thing. So like his eyes are lanterns. The bottom of his chin is a wavy C with a pirate ship right there. I could go over this whole drawing with everything that's in there, but like he got a dragon. Gnomes are his tail. Oh, yeah, I really like this one. Makes me happy. Okay, I kind of fudged the boundaries a little bit of like drawing Gunther. This one is Gunther, but it's like my human rendition of Gunther. Like this is like what I think he would look like if Gunther was like a real human, or at least a character. But yeah, like you got like the messed up ear, you got the messed up eye. I always saw him as like an outdoorsman, not very social, you know, because he's actually that. He hates animals. He loves people, but he hates animals. Like every time he sees an animal, he's gonna fight it. Cheated just a little tiny bit, but you can't say it's not Gunther. It is Gunther. Just like alternate universe Gunther. Ooh, this is a big one. Okay. So I was trying to think of like what I could draw, because I still had over half of the sketchbook left. I was like, dude, I'm gonna run out of ideas. Seriously, like I was afraid I was gonna hit like the end of my road, like creative block. So I was trying to think of what I could draw, and so I decided, hey, I'm gonna do freaking Inktober. So I went and did all 31 drawings for Inktober. I didn't actually like do them on the days of Inktober. I just did all of the prompts that were there. But so the next 31 drawings that we're gonna see are of Inktober Gunther. One thing that I wanted to do for these drawings was I didn't want to erase construction lines. I didn't want anything to be too fancy. I didn't want to use real color. Like it's all just penciled in with a brush pen. I only used 3 supplies for each of the drawings. So I thought it was special though. Just make them like fun little doodles. Again, your drawings don't need to be anything special every single time that you make one. They can just be drawings. You know, just slap some ink on a piece of paper and that's good enough. You have fan, which how can you not appreciate the Gunther abs? It's beautiful. He's gorgeous. Compass. This one's cool. This is one of the favorite things that I like to do, is like make scenarios and characters out of things. So like stuff like this is my bread and butter. And you've got Collide. That one's always fun. Take it back to like classic Looney Tunes. Oh yeah, you got Leak. I tried to make him look as disgusting as possible, and I think I did it. Oh, who knew that Gunther's head could look saggy? This one, I really like. I tried to make like a Gunther dinosaur because the prompt was extinct. I went with a Stegosaurus, but then I actually gave him the pattern of Gunther's fur. Yeah, this is one of my favorites. I love looking through this journal. This journal is extremely special to me. You have, oh god, you got Splat. Classy, very classy drawing by me. You have Connect, which this one will actually make an appearance later because I loved the idea of a Robo Gunther. So I actually recreated a more sophisticated one later on in the journal. Yeah. Oh, this one's great. You got a 2-part. You got Spark, and then Crispy. Slither. Again, you got a nice Gunther snake, I guess. And then Risk. I think that right there is actually a beautiful send-off for the Gunther Inktober, showing him like in a big battle. This is what I was talking about. I actually made Robo Gunther, and right there, if you can actually see that, he's got the broken ear. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, this one's a problem. So I took inspiration from the little like wood carvings of Norse gods that the Nordic people would make, and they're like little like wooden pegs, and they would carve the gods into those and have like they have their own little icons. So I wanted to make one of Gunther, but he kind of looks like a penis. I think it looks pretty cool though, you know, if you get past the phallic nature of it. This one, you've got the Mosaic Gunther. That one was very, like, it took a long time to make because I basically just had my ruler there and I basically just kept, like, dragging it. My process, if anyone's curious, is, like, I did the original shapes. So, like, I did a general sketch of Gunther's head, and then every shape that was there, I tried to get them as straight as possible to the point where you could get a general shape of him, but it's still the straight line. So you can see, especially on this side right here, it shows it well, that there's like that slight corner and edge to it. That's because every single line in this is a straight line. So I did like the general ones of those, and then every single point that I had in there, I came off of that and did little lines from there to have it just like look like scattered, which I think, again, one of my favorites in there. Every time that I use color in this, it always catches my eye, you know? Oh my god. Oh no. I didn't even notice when I made it. Oh god. Oh no. That's like furry. Furry Gunther. Oh. I made my fucking cat into a furry. We'll just move on. That one didn't happen. This is the final drawing in it. It's Origami Gunther, but it's almost like origamiception, because I drew origami onto a piece of it. Like, it's not actual origami, but it's a drawing. Yeah, that one's pretty cool. I thought that was a fun one to end on. And I believe, yeah, that's the end of the Gunther journal. So, let's move on from the Shatner Method, and then from here, this is just getting straight into tips for creating my art, which I'm hoping can actually really help out a lot of you out there. This one is covering tangents. Tangents are something in your art that should be avoided. Sometimes the way that you're making your art, you can't help that a tangent is there, but if you can avoid it, do it, because not having tangents really adds a lot of depth to your drawing, which if you were struggling with what I was, that can really help out with bringing some life to your drawings, is adding depth to it. Tip number 3, inspiration. This is where I was trying to find like the right balance for getting inspired by certain things. I think I even have a formula for it, yeah. So do 30% life drawing, 45% photo reference, and then 25% pre-existing art from the artist that you admire. Definitely look to them for inspiration in terms of what they're doing and why they're doing it, but don't just recreate their art, because I know how that feels personally to go through, and it does make you feel unfulfilled. No matter how similar two people's art may look, you are never going to have the same thought process as someone else when you're creating their art. Take tips from them and like figure out like why they're creating their art that way, but then use that and make it your own, you know? That should be like the biggest goal for just art worldwide, should be that like we see millions of different styles and iterations of art, just to see like people's inspirations and their backgrounds and their goals and their desires and their love for art in different ways. That's the goal. So like really like try and look at the outside world more and see what you can take from that. Tip number 4, symbolism. This one is personally for me the biggest thing, just mainly when it comes to story writing, but it also does help when you're creating a character too. Like if you're just doing a simple character design, when creating characters, find features for them that are symbolically parallel to their personalities. This goes for color and accessories, or even little icons and symbols integrated into their visuals. Drawing nature. This one is basically just making sure that when you draw things like water or smoke, clouds, things like that, they stay organic instead of looking, you know, like too symmetrical or too pre-made. Tip number 6, clothing. This is one that I struggle with a lot personally. Getting the right folds into clothes. Basically what I got from it was like the biggest place that you should put lines or creases into clothing is at tension points. So like whenever you have some of your clothes getting scrunched up, whether that be like under the armpit or you're lifting your arm up so then you got it up there, you'll have like the creases following that. Kind of like this little diagram that I did, or just a little drawing that I did down here. So like you've got the lines that follow the arm, right? And then you also have lines that go where there's excess fabric. That just shows like a lot of it like overlapping and stuff. The biggest thing for me personally though is I don't want to put too many lines on it because my art is very minimal in terms of detail. So when you put extra lines somewhere, that shows like clear, precise indication of something being there. So if you just want something to be like a faint detail, I'd recommend, for my art anyways, like just doing a shadow there or like a highlight. Now we're getting into the big bajunga. This is practicing fundamentals. Let's get into it. Perspective. It's actually kind of funny. When I go and look at the fundamentals in terms of my previous experience with them, the ones that I was most confident in were the ones that I struggled with the most, and the ones that I was most nervous about were actually the ones that I did the best in. So perspective and shadows, I was like, those will be easy, I've done those all the time. And then it was form and composition that I was like, oh no, those are gonna go poorly, those are gonna go bad. Perspective, turned out I was not that good at perspective. I'm still, like, I know how to do it, so I can do it, but I don't have a firm grasp on it, which is okay. You know what? Over time, I just have to keep doing it, and I'll get there. Basically, all it is just, it's a good way to make your drawings look 3D, to look like they're actually in an environment instead of just a thing sitting there. Simply put, perspective can be described as a trick of depth used to make your drawing look 3D. You use points and guide certain lines off of them to create the 3D trick for objects in the drawing. The horizon line is where the surface of your drawing blends into the background. The vanishing point is when all of the objects on the surface disappear. So like, if you look here, you've got the lines that guide it, which indicate where corners are going to be at, and then the red dots are the vanishing points. That's where like everything that's going towards that is eventually going to disappear on that one point. And horizon lines, the nice part about those is you can put those anywhere that you want to in your drawing. There's nothing that says they have to be in a certain place. When it comes to the drawing that you're trying to make, you can put them absolutely wherever and it doesn't matter. Which is a big thing that really helps out, because then at that point you're really just doing basic tracing, basic geometry, and if you take your time with that enough, you can really get some cool things that you make with perspective. The next one is form. At the time I didn't really understand what form was, but then it just turned out that that's just like the breaking down of figures into the simple shapes, what the sixation principle was talking about. And I was like, oh, okay, I've done that literally forever with my art. In fact, I learned that from Jazza, you know, where you have like the simple shape of the head and then you put on the jaw and then the neck, and then from there you put on details. Once you have your, basically just your foundation is what form is. And then foreshortening comes in with form. Once you understand the form of objects, you can then use that to create foreshortening. So if you look here, when you break down these shapes at their flattest level into just the simplest ones, you can then take those and tweak them so that you can make regular objects foreshortened. So like this pencil here, it's just like a cone and then a couple of cylinders right there. But if you do that trick over here, where you have it kind of angled facing towards the viewer, then you can create a pencil that looks just like that. Same with the car as well. Here's another tip actually, tone and value. That people have different terms for these, but this is what I know it as. Very simple. Tone is the level of light / shade, then value is the saturation. The top is tone, then the side is value. So that's high value, high tone, high value, low tone, low value, high tone, and then low value, low tone. So you can see that the ones at the bottom, because the saturation is low, these colors are a lot grayer. They're a lot softer on the eye. These ones punch out a lot more. And then obviously darkness. Next tip is, this one is something purely personal for me. When highlighting a preferred design for a sketch, use these 3 colors. So this is like when I have like my planning sketchbooks for a comic. For environments I do green, a person I do red, anything involving a person too, that would be like hair, tattoos, things like that. And then just like an inanimate object, I use blue. it really separates the sketchbook into like nice categories so that the whole thing doesn't look too muddy when you're looking through it. Like you can really figure out what you're trying to look for. So say I'm showing someone the sketchbook of one of my comics and they want to look at all the character designs. If they just go through and then look for all of the red, then they'll know, hey, that's all the character design stuff. Or if they want to see just my environments, they just look for the green color and then look through the book, and then they'll find all my environments there. Moving on to my next fundamental, which is lighting. This one here, when drawing or coloring shadow on an object, you have to visualize the 3D form of the real life object. Use a reference if necessary. Please, I don't know if anyone makes this clear enough, please use references. Please trace and copy, just so long as you're not stealing. But really, like, do that stuff. It really does help. I know that I said that like I was having that issue with style before where I was just copying artists. That's because I was going on it the wrong way. But it really does help teach you some really simple things when it comes to drawing, especially real life stuff. If you want to figure out the shadows of the face, just go look in the mirror or look at pictures, and that's okay. But then from here, these are all just shadow diagrams showing what a light source looks like at certain angles. And you can see that the arrows show where the light is coming from. And this helps out a lot. This is one of the biggest things that added depth to my drawings. A big thing that happened before was I didn't really have a decent understanding of the 3D layout of a face. So then when I put the shadows on a person, they looked very basic. And so that really made them flat in the drawing. You know, they didn't pop. Like, look at that top guy. That really does look like just a guy with like light going up on his face. Like, that shadow makes sense when you see it. This one is the part that I struggled with the most, was casting shadows, which this is where perspective comes into play. It can get pretty complicated, so I'll just read it out for you and see if you guys can understand this. Drawing shadows can be more complex than just plain shading, but if you actually understand perspective at a decent level, you can gain a grasp on shadows fairly quickly. When you do the trick where you have your light source and then you go straight down and then that's your ground perspective, you do that to make the lines of the shadow. So then you take this and then you line it up with each of the corners, and then if you follow each of these, you can see where that comes from. That's referred to as like the invisible corners, like the ones that the light source doesn't see. That's where the shadow comes from. So you drag those out to show where the shadow is going to be at, and then you use the top, which is your actual light source, to show where the shadow stops. So then you take this up to the top corner, because that's where it's actually being cast from. So if you can see here, I just kind of shaded in just a tiny bit. It's pretty faint, but just a tiny bit I shaded in where the part is actually not getting any light, so that's where the shadow is being cast. So then if you line up that top corner of the shadow, the light source, you can find out where the shadow is going to stop. So then you do that with each corner, and right there it stops there, and then right there this corner stops right there, which is why you have that little odd divot in the shadow right there. It's actually nice that I'm talking about this because it gives me a little refresher with this stuff. Nice shortcut, by the way. If your light source is the sun, then I'm just going to call them the green points and the purple points, which would be ground perspective and then basic perspective. Those are actually the same thing because you're using the entire environment behind the character. So then you can actually cheat a little bit, or not cheat, but like get a little shortcut, and that you can basically just use the exact same points to create your next shadow that you're casting. And again, just a rough sketch. It's not completely lined up. This is more for like if you're like standing under a light pole or if there's a lamp in the room, stuff like that. Next one is composition. This one's funny. I was terrified to do this one because I was thinking, oh my god, like I don't know anything about composition. Like I am gonna fail at this. Even if I do learn it, I am screwed. There's no way that this is going to advance into anything that I can apply anywhere. But then I went and did some research into it, and I found out it's actually very simple. And there's really like no formula for it. You can do whatever you want with composition. At least the way that I see it. Some people may hear this and think,
he doesn't understand composition properly.
Fine. Go ahead and think that. But basically the way that I see composition is just, this can apply to movies, comic books, things like that, or just even a simple drawing. Whatever you're trying to convey, you use composition to essentially take the reader's or the consumer's attention to the right thing. This can be anything from like if you want them to notice only one thing, you do center biased. Layering, this is when you use a background, midground, and foreground. So like as you can see right here, in the foreground, we've got this guy that's looking at this island in the midground, and then behind that is just the ocean. That's a nice way to show depth, so that characters going on a journey, so you want to show the distance. You've got different focuses. You've got focus by contrast or focus by depth. This was originally called focus by blur, but I played with it in terms of trying to make it universal for all art, so I call it focus by depth. But with focus by contrast, it's just use contrast by lighting or things like that to show where you want the focus to be. So everything is dark in this drawing, including the main character, except for that lamp. So your brain is drawn to that lamp. Focus by depth is the same thing. That's the only thing that's clear to us. That's the only thing that we can fully process. Our brain sees that and is like, hey, look at that kid. Don't look at that blurry one. You don't even know what that is. It's just a blur blob. Asymmetry is one, it's actually kind of like a cool opposite in a way of rule of thirds. Nothing symmetrical whatsoever, so you want the audience to feel uncomfortable. And in fact, I even want to read my note over here that I put with composition. Just remember, you don't have to use any of these specifically. Composition doesn't have any set rules or parameters. All it is playing with the layout of your drawing to convey whatever emotion or message you want. Just make sure you do have fun with composition so that none of your shots are too stale. Ooh, this is the big mama of the entire book. Pretty much all of it is anatomy, because I tried to cover absolutely every single topic possible. It gets down into very, very fine details. These are all the categories that I covered. The human skeleton, how body parts move, difference between male and female, creating a body, and then heads and necks, faces, mouths, eyes, expressions, hands and feet, breaking the body into proportions, fun with proportions, body types goes in between those two, hair, difficult angles, and poses. Here we go. So this is the first step, the human skeleton. So like I said, I wanted to understand what I was drawing, so I tried to break the skeleton down into a fairly sophisticated sketch of one. I tried to make it actually look like a skeleton, and I think I was pretty successful. So then from there, I went and broke it down into where the joints are, or body parts are. These are all the notes that I have in terms of proportions actually. Start with the head and the torso, then add the pelvis with decent space from the torso. Legs go next. The upper leg is slightly longer than the lower. Save arms for last. Shoulders are at any width that you want. Then elbows go between the pelvis and torso. So this space that I put right here, that's where the elbows go. And hands go halfway to the knee. So the stopping point of a hand goes at the middle point of the femur. This gets into how body parts move. Nothing too special here. This is just showing each pose that I could think of that a body part could do. I've got shoulders, torso, pushing it in or out, kind of like that. Then we got the arms. Again, nothing special there. This is one thing that I noted just for when I'm doing my own rough sketching. Oh, when the elbow bends, it extends, so it turns from the circle to a little triangle-ish shape. We have the hands. This one doesn't cover fingers because I put right here, use real hand as reference for different finger positions. So this is just for how the hand itself moves. So the wrist going back and forth like that, the fingers extending, folding in to make a fist. I've got feet here. This is one thing that I really liked about feet too, was the toes bend more than the ankle, so the foot slightly curves when you draw it in a cartoon fashion. Kind of looks like that, which you can actually see I did there. This is getting into male versus female. So whenever I'm drawing a rough diagram of a male versus female body, I literally just draw the shapes like underwear would look, because that just shows what they actually have down there and how that would look within clothing and how their body works and bends and stuff like that. So then the next section that we've got is creating a body. This one was more trying to break down the build of an actual body into a more simplified shape so that I could understand it better and I could apply it easier when it comes to drawing. I did an actual proper diagram of the muscles, kind of like I did with the skeleton. Then I simplified those down into simple muscles, and I drew a nice ass for you guys. And now we get into heads and necks. This one is a big one, personally, that I needed to work on, showing how a head looks from the back end in terms of how I draw. This one is just to show what the head looks like from the side. Note that from a side view, the head is slightly longer. Just with the way that a skull is, it's longer than it is wider. So when you're drawing a head from the side, you want to extend the width that you've put on the head from the front view just a little bit. And then when it comes to the neck, you want the neck to go slightly behind the jaw, just like how I laid it out here. So like you have the neck right here, and then the neck is going to be the same around, you know? So you want to make sure that you have a good enough size neck to work with that. And then right here when it shows drawing behind it, I kind of divided it into nice like clean shapes right here, if you can see, just to show, you know, like how the jaw is going to look from the back. So it's kind of nice to think of this as almost like a little box, and then you have like it narrowing down into the chin, and then the neck goes right up under the cranium. Then we got faces. Like I said, I kind of covered this in the basic form of a head, but this is just like the features that I put on with a head from step by step. Basic shapes of the cranium and jaw, put on direction lines. That's a big one. If you want to show like different angles of the head, like looking like that, looking down, things like that, you want to really work with your direction lines and how those are going to contort with your head. Then I go nose. I put the nose right in the middle of the face. Like I put it right on the direction line, vertical, and it also starts right under the horizontal direction line, which that I actually use as my eye line, because I noticed that the eyes and the ears line up along with the bridge of your nose. So I start with the bridge of my nose, build the nose from down under there, and then I have the eyeballs going from like extending from the nose, and then I actually show on this next one that I have the ear following the ends of the horizontal direction line. And then from there I put on the eyebrows, and then the mouth. Those ones can go wherever you want them to. Eyebrows especially, because those are moved a lot for expression. And then I just go and put on hair, and then the hairline again can start wherever you want it to. But the important things to note is that, you know how like you have that peak right here, and I actually drew it right here. You know how you have that peak on the edge of where your temples go? The temples are right next to the eyebrows. So however you're drawing your hairline, if we look at this, so you have your hairline at the top, and then where it points downward and then starts to go down to the sideburns, you have that little peak in there that you have to put in right next to the eyebrows, and then from there you put in your sideburns. This one is mouths. Not really anything here too fancy, too much of a revelation. This is more just to show, and this is the biggest rule for mouths, is to remember that the mouth is a 3D object. You don't just draw on a mouth. You need to show that the lips extend outward and that it goes inward where the cheeks are and the teeth are, that the teeth go inward. Again, rough sketch. This isn't the best demonstration, but this just shows like how the teeth and the tongue and the mouth are gonna look at different angles. So you've got the front angled and then side. While this may not be laid out and drawn properly, this is just to show how parts of the mouth shift at different angles. Okay, then we got the eyes here. And this wasn't me going over how to draw eyes. I mean, I did do like a realistic depiction of eyes to show like the eyelids, the iris, the pupil, and then the reflection. But like I already knew that, so I just sort of had it there for reference. And then from there, I showed my simplified eyeball, where the whole color will fill the iris. So there's no pupil, there's no black dot, it's just that. And because of that, I have this nice note right here. Pupils expand and contract according to certain emotions. So, since my eyes don't have pupils, the whole iris will change size instead. So, like when a character's calm, they're gonna have a larger iris, but then when they're like excited or scared or angry, the whole iris is going to shrink to a really small size. Next one here is expressions. I'm just going to read this whole one for you because there's something really important to note in here. The only thing I really want to discuss is how the face moves with different expressions. I have a sheet with expressions which will be great for references, referring to my picture in there in the Style Overhaul folder. But this is covering stretch and scrunch points. Those are the parts of the face that either contract or expand depending on certain emotions. So if you like push your face out as far as it can go, if you do like that, you note what parts actually take the most shape when you do that. So that would be the forehead and the edges of your mouth, so like right at the bottom of the cheeks right there. Those are the stretch points. Scrunch points are when your face comes together like that. You got to note the parts that fold there. So that would be like in between the eyebrows and and like right on the bridge, under the eyes. So like when you squint, and then the nose, because you notice how like the nose goes like that. Next part is hands. This was another one that like I really did need to work on, but it was easier than I thought it was going to be. So we have here just a vision of where each part of the hand bends. So like you've got the one joint, technically the two joints that's in the thumb. You've got the three in the fingers, and then you've got the wrist itself. And then over here, I drew in the proportions for a hand. And then this one is just showing the details that I have for a hand. So like, again, I want to keep them like as detail free as possible. So all I've got on the front of them is the nails and the knuckle. I actually put in a line there to indicate where the knuckles are gonna go. And then the inside or the back of the hand shows where like the meat of the thumb is, where the meat of the wrist is. And then you also have that little chunk right there that doesn't get drawn enough. So like whenever you have a hand that folds in, this section right at the edge, that also has some meat to it. So I have that drawn in there, along with the crease of the skin at the base of the fingers. Next one, we have feet. I can't remember the last time I've drawn bare feet. And so this was actually a really interesting exercise for me to do. And so right here, I'm just showing basic construction with the proportions. So like you have like the base of the foot, and then you put on the heel from there, and then the toes. And then this is just to show details of the foot, like how it looks. These are the creases of the foot. So like, you know, when you do a footprint, and you can see that like it gets like fat and then really skinny and then fat again at the heel. So I put in the creases there to indicate that. Next section is torsos and limbs. This is just to show basic detail. Again, we've already gone over how those body parts are made up, how those parts move. So this is just to show what I'm gonna put on there whenever I draw like if I draw a shirtless guy, or if I draw someone's bare leg or bare arm. These are the details that I would put in if I were to draw those body parts. Body types, this is the big one. This was just sort of trying it out. So like I've got an average body type, skinny, muscular, and fat. I didn't do it with women. I'm sorry, I'm not that comfortable with drawing the female body. I can do it. I'm pretty good at it, but like that's not my strong suit. So if I'm trying to like demonstrate something as like a teaching lesson, I have to with the male body. Here we go. This is getting into fun with proportions. So if you look here, you can actually indicate like there's a lot of space from the edge of the body to the bone. And so that's to just show muscles, you know? So like the lanky and tall guy down here, there's very little distance from the edge of the arm to the actual bone itself. That's because he doesn't have much muscle. But this guy, there's a lot of space in there. Then the next page, I actually simplified it down into like simple blocks, and this actually makes doing different proportions a lot easier, because then I can do the fun cartoon body shapes, you know, like you've got this guy down here who's got like those like legs that really like extend out far, you know, like they get really fat as you go down, kind of like cones. So I made this little diagram here, and that's actually what I draw first on a character, and then I make the details from there. This one is hair. This one was a bit tough for me because I've been trying to figure out how to define the hair that I draw instead of it just looking like a Lego piece, you know? I used to draw in lines, but that looked too busy. That was too much random detail, and it became a problem when it came to replicating a character over multiple frames or pages. I want to keep the detail consistent. Like I want to be able to copy the exact detail that I have on a character to the next frame so it looks like exactly the same. But I needed something, and so I've been trying to experiment with highlights in hair, and I think it actually went really well because I did highlights in the hair with two drawings of mine. This sketch that I did of me, Haley, Adam, and my brother Spencer, and we've all got highlights in our hair. I just drew like a strip to show like a source of light hitting around the hair, because hair's shiny, you know? So there's the rim light from your main light source, and then any extra light, there's going to be that hair that kind of like wraps around almost like a halo to indicate where the hair is. Every now and then I will randomly put in a break in that ring that will be a random width, a random distance from the next one, to show like the hair is still organic, you know, the hair's not a fake piece of clay or whatever. So I did it for this piece, and then I also did it for the design that I have for my business card. Also, those strips that you put in there have to go with the flow of your hair. So if you look at the one on the business card, you can see that that curves with the edge of the hair. And then you also got some fun, silly stuff, like you've got facial hair, body hair. This is where it gets interesting. Here we have difficult angles. This is covering head and body. The head went all right. I've got the side, which was fairly simple. Angled up, this one actually turned out really well, although it was a challenge to make. You've got, down here, you've got the back of the head, back side view, so that's like if you're looking at me more like that almost, where you can still see some of my face. That's the top of the head, and then you've got slightly lowered. The biggest thing with slightly lowered, like I said, is the direction line. So you can see here that for one, the hairline actually is angled down quite a bit. The hairline stays parallel to the direction line that goes horizontally. So like here you can see that it angles a slight bit, and then it also, the ear slightly higher than the eyes. And then right here is lower, like if you're like ashamed and looking up at somebody like that, that's what that facial expression is. Those turned out pretty well. They were difficult, but I'm proud of those ones. The body I struggled with a bit more because I ran into the problem of whenever I drew bodies that were angled down or up, like there was still that part where they didn't look like 3D things anymore. So like if you look on the back side here, I've got the top view, like if you're just looking down directly at someone's shoulders. Back view, this one looks really good. This one you can tell that it's like someone laying down on the ground, and they're angled upwards at an angle. Angled down looks pretty good too, although it looks a little bit just like they have small legs if your immersion kind of breaks. But I think it'll come into play better when we have shading and actual details on the character. Next one that we have is poses. This was kind of like what I did with expressions. So showing like what it does when you bring your body in closest together or expanding your body completely out. That is all for anatomy though. That is everything that I could have possibly learned with anatomy. And so this next part here, we are actually going to be looking more into just the drawing itself. So the first part that I did with actually applying all the knowledge that I had into my art was I did want to experiment with styles again. I was pretty confident in how I was going to draw, but I still just wanted to see, you know, maybe there was an idea that I could come up with later that would actually work better for my art. So the first thing that I did was I just showed how I draw, and that's actually Nathan Drake. So I did like a little head right there, and then the whole body. Tried to keep it as proportionate as possible from everything that I learned. And then from there, I went onto this page and then tried different styles. And so I've got my style up at the top there. Sort of punk style, kind of like you would see in like a 90s MTV cartoon, kind of like Beavis and Butthead or Daria, Family Guy, things like that. You got a more cartoony style, edgy style, whimsical style. It's kind of like Disney-esque sort of thing. Or this one is like more of an icon style, something that you would see in like a simpler cartoon today, kind of like some Cartoon Network shows like Steven Universe or things like that. But I decided that the winner was my style. Now, I bet you're all wondering,
Oh, Carter. Wise artist Carter. Why did you choose your style over all of those other ones? Aren't you biased?
maybe I am a little biased, but I have a good reason, and I actually wrote it down right here. We have to remember that the purpose of style is problem solving. We apply style to convey what we need with our art for simplicity, efficiency, conveying a message, etc. So, why am I using style? Well, my main focus is comic books and a little bit of animation. So my goal is to make art, specifically stories and characters, that can be exaggerated and exciting enough to tell amazing stories, but also be consistent enough that I can convey the same figures and pieces over multiple illustrations. This next part is actually me creating an actual drawing, specifically applying all of the tools that I've learned from this art journey. So all the guides, sort of, that I applied to this drawing were anatomy, form, lighting, foreshortening, composition, and perspective. So I decided that one that would show that pretty well was a man pointing a gun with a tower in the background. So this right here is actually my drawing. And while he does kind of look like an anime character, I didn't mean to make the eyes look like that. I think this looks great. I am very happy with how this looks. I think the foreshortening on the gun looks great. His arm doesn't look ridiculous for the foreshortening. It actually looks just like an arm extending in the distance, like that kind of. I thought of it too, like, I don't know, maybe the story behind this is he's hunting after some people that sort of take control of that tower. So then you get a nice little Easter egg sort of symbol kind of thing that he's actually like technically pointing it at the tower, which like he's trying to take down the men that are controlling the tower. So like that right there is actually what he's after. So I thought that was kind of a cool way to do the drawing, and I think that the figure looks great. I think that the shadows, especially on his face, look really well. It's hard to tell with the webcam, so I apologize for that. And then you've also got here, you've got the sun up at the top, and then you've got a little shadow that was cast by the tower. Just simple, but it's there. Part 7, drawing different people. This one doesn't have any notes. This is just purely practice, and this is just me coming up with different features to put on characters and making multiple characters from there. This one is my personal favorite, actually. It kind of looks like, I can't remember what the kid's name was, but it was the ginger kid on Malcolm in the Middle that was always biting people. Part 8, drawing animals and creatures. This one was just merely for practice. There's not really anything to be taught from this, because one thing that I've actually learned from doing this section specifically was, if you're going to create a creature, do not be afraid to look up pictures of that thing so that you know like what you're trying to make. Whoops. Oh gosh. That was my ring hitting the table. My bad. But like there's a bunch of them in here that like I didn't know what they looked like, so I went and got photo references and I went and copied them, and there's nothing wrong with that, you know? Like I would not have been able to make this pig if it weren't for a picture, let alone the freaking chameleon. And I wanted to keep the thing too that like these animals, you actually see it in the dog as well, they have eyes just like humans do, because I still want to show some kind of semblance of emotion in all these creatures. We've got a lion, which this one is one of my favorites. And then I actually drew a dragon. Then there's the next part, drawing environments. Environments is actually something that I'm trying to work on. In fact, I actually have a big video that I'm going to be making soon of me drawing environments. That's something that I've always really struggled with, just in terms of laying out details and making sure that they are exciting environments. I'm just going to read you the notes that I have here. I believe those are it for the notes. 1, it doesn't matter how you draw your environments, so long as they add to what you are trying to convey in your art. Same with composition. Environments do the exact same purpose. Even like stuff as simple as like color palette, you know, you want to make sure that the symbolism and the message that you're getting across is clear to the audience. 2, the 2 most important tools for drawing environments is perspective and composition. 3, environmental art is just like any art. It's okay to use references and roughly plan beforehand. You don't need to have the whole thing down in one go. That's personally something that I've struggled with a lot, is because I never really thought about environments too much, I never really took the time to apply them like I do my characters. And so as a result, my environments have looked very poor in the past. But these are some ones that I created. This one is just a basic setup of a bedroom. I actually tried to create my room that you can see behind me, just to show like a basic setup of what it looks like. Again, nothing too special. This was more to practice perspective, actually, 1-point perspective. So like I put in like my dresser, my books, my bed, stuff like that. This one shelf up there, actually up there in that corner. This one here, again, just tried it. It's just a simple little trail with some trees kind of blocking the whole path. And then I've just got like a whole nature piece where you got these little trees right here, and then you've got the mountains with the trees, and then the big old mountains themselves. And again, there's nothing too special here. Like there's not really any perspective or anything like that working with this. I just put in the features, and that's okay when you draw environments. You can totally do that. This one is just 2-point perspective. Yeah, I just did this and then tried to like put in some different buildings along the side. I thought that would be some fun stuff to put in, and it shows like what the road looks like with the perspective. And that's it. That is the book. We're at the conclusion, so I'll just read this aloud to you guys like I did the introduction. Well, I've made it. I finished the book. I learned new things. I refreshed on things I already knew. I completed the Shatner Method, almost. I refined my style to a better place. I feel ready to make art. Now I'll mess up some art. I'll throw out some art. But that's okay. Art's not about being the best. It's about trying your best. And I'm ready to jump back into it all. This book can be used as reminders, or hell, maybe someone else can learn from it. Draw on. And that is my art journey. I feel like this is really getting somewhere. I really feel like my skill is growing to a place to where this can actually be something that is sustained my entire life. And that's the whole goal. I am very happy that I presented this to you guys. I'm very happy that I did this journal, that I did the other journal. While they did certainly put a hiccup in my process of story writing and stuff like that, it was absolutely necessary, and I don't regret it for a second. And I recommend that very heavily to everybody that's watching that wants to become an artist. Don't be scared to go back to the basics, you know? Don't attach your pride to your art. If you don't know how to work on perspective or composition or any of the fundamentals, go and learn. It's okay to stop the process to make sure that you are doing it with the correct utilities at hand. And also just make sure you're making art that you enjoy, you know? If other people don't like it, who fucking cares, man? But just make sure that if this is something that you're going after, it's something that you keep your head in, keep practicing at, and just run into the fucking horizon with it. That's all I have to say. Thank you guys so much for watching. This was Carter Sandvin. Go and check out my other content that I have. I have an Instagram that I'm about to start back up pretty soon. I'm about to start uploading to it again. Pretty soon I will have other websites open up. I am trying to make like an official website for Sandbox Illustration, but I guess that's all I can say. So thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe. Comment on the video. Let me know any recommendations for videos that you might like from me. And have fun, dudes.